$10,000 says he cries before dessert. Preston Aldridge slapped a stack of cash on the conference table, grinning like a kid pulling wings off a fly. Dominic Blackstone picked up the money, fanned it once, and dropped it back down. Make it 20. I want to see his face when he realizes nobody in that room will even look at him. They didn't know Ethan Calloway was standing 6 feet away, holding their quarterly reports, hearing every word through the crack in the door. He didn't run. He didn't flinch. He pushed that door open and walked straight into the room. What happened 3 nights later at the most exclusive gala in America? Not one person in that conference room, not the billionaire, not his cruel friends, not even Ethan himself, was prepared for it. Comment your city so I can see how far this story has reached. And if you're still here at the end, you'll understand why millions of people couldn't stop watching. Subscribe. This is only the beginning. $10,000 says he cries before dessert. The words punched through the conference room door and hit Ethan Calloway square in the chest. He stopped walking. His hand was already reaching for the door handle. The quarterly reports, 37 pages he'd finished an hour ahead of deadline, pressed against his ribs through the folder. Make it 20. That was Dominic Blackstone, his boss. The man Ethan had worked for every single day for 2 years. The guy owns one pair of dress shoes. I've seen them. The sole is held together with glue. How do you even notice something like that? Victoria Langford laughed. Because it's hilarious. The man walks around my building in superglued shoes and thinks nobody sees it. Ethan looked down at his feet. The crack in his left sole was hidden today. He'd re-glued it last night while Sophie watched cartoons. So you're actually doing this? Miles Thornton's voice now. You're inviting him to the Harrington Gala? Think about it, Dominic said. Ethan Calloway, black tie, the Waldorf, standing next to senators and CEOs in a suit he probably bought at a clearance rack, trying to figure out which fork to use while everyone in the room pretends not to stare. He won't come, Preston said. He'll make some excuse about his kid. Probably. Single dads always hide behind their kids. And if he does come? Dominic's voice dropped, cold and precise. Then we get the show of the century. A broke single father from Queens, trying to pretend he belongs with people who actually matter. It'll remind him exactly where he stands. The laughter that followed was the ugliest sound Ethan had ever heard. Not because it was loud, because it was easy. They laughed the way people laugh at something that doesn't matter. Something beneath them. Something invisible. And that was the word, wasn't it? Invisible. That's what Ethan Calloway had been for 2 years, maybe longer. He stood outside that door for 3 more seconds. His pulse hammered in his throat. His knuckles went white around the folder's edge. Walk away, said every survival instinct he'd built over 34 years of getting by. Walk away. Go back to your desk, pick up Sophie, make dinner, forget this ever happened. Then a different voice. His mother's voice. Margaret Calloway. Dead 9 years, but still the loudest thing in his head when it mattered. Don't you ever let anyone make you small, baby. Don't you dare. Ethan knocked on the door. Come in. He pushed it open. 4 faces turned toward him. Dominic behind his desk, jacket off, sleeves rolled to the elbows, looking exactly like the magazine covers that called him America's most eligible billionaire. Preston against the window, arms crossed, still smirking. Victoria on the leather couch, legs crossed, phone in hand. Miles at the bar cart, bourbon halfway to his lips. Nobody flinched. Nobody looked guilty. That was the part that almost broke him. They didn't even care enough to pretend. Quarterly reports, Ethan said. He set the folder on the desk. His hand did not shake. He would not let his hand shake. Right. Dominic picked it up, flipped 2 pages without reading a word, set it down. Thanks. Silence. The kind that has teeth. Actually, Ethan, I've been meaning to ask you something. Ethan watched it happen in slow motion. Preston shifting forward. Victoria pressing her lips together to kill a smile. Miles setting down his glass. Wolves circling. That's what this was. Wolves who'd never been hungry a day in their lives, circling a man who'd been hungry most of his. The Harrington Foundation Charity Gala, Dominic said. This Saturday, black tie at the Waldorf. Senators, executives, old money, new money, the works. I need someone to accompany me. He paused, let it hang. Would you be available? The room held its breath. Ethan looked at Dominic's face. Gray eyes, perfect jawline. The relaxed posture of a man who had never once wondered if his card would decline at a register. Behind those eyes, Ethan could see it. The anticipation. The entertainment. The absolute certainty that Ethan Calloway would stammer out an excuse and confirm everything they believed about him. Small. Afraid. Invisible. 3 faces flashed through Ethan's mind in the space of a heartbeat. His mother, coming home from her second job at midnight, shoes in her hand so she wouldn't wake him, still finding the energy to leave a note on his pillow. You're going to be somebody, baby. I know it. His father, Frank, standing in the front row of Ethan's college graduation. The only man in the auditorium crying openly and not giving a damn who saw. And Sophie, 7 years old, gap-toothed grin, that drawing on the refrigerator. Ethan wearing a crown, standing next to a castle made of hearts. My daddy is the king of our house. I'd be happy to attend, Mr. Blackstone, Ethan said. What time should I be ready? Dominic blinked. Just once. A microfracture in that perfect composure. 7. The car will pick you up. A beat. It's extremely formal, Ethan. The kind of event where appearances are everything. Understood. Anything else you need today? No, that's all. Ethan turned and walked out. Back straight, steps even, eyes forward. The door closed behind him. The explosion came instantly. Oh my God! Preston. He said yes! He actually said yes! I'm starting the group chat right now. Victoria, already typing. Single Dad Watch 2025. Everyone in. I want live updates. 5,000 says he shows up in a rental from Men's Warehouse. Miles. 10 says he mentions his kid within 5 minutes. Preston. 20 says he doesn't last past cocktail hour. Dominic. The biggest bet. From the man who signed Ethan's paychecks. Ethan walked to his desk, sat down, put his hands flat on the surface, and pressed hard, like he was trying to hold the desk to the floor, or himself to the chair. The numbers on his screen blurred. 2 years, 730 days of showing up early, staying late, solving problems, absorbing Dominic's moods, handling crises at 2 in the morning, managing a schedule that would have broken most people in a month. And this was his value. A bet. A joke. Something to laugh about over bourbon in a room that cost more per square foot than Ethan made in a week. His phone buzzed. Hi, Daddy. When are you coming home? I miss you. That little crown emoji. Sophie had started adding it to every text last month. Because you're a king, Daddy, she'd explained, dead serious, as if this were an obvious fact that required no further discussion. Ethan typed back, Soon, Princess. He put the phone down, pressed his palms harder into the desk. Okay, 3 days, $1,200 in savings, money earmarked for Sophie's preschool tuition, one suit that belonged in a Goodwill bin, shoes held together with superglue, and 4 people who were absolutely certain he would fail. Ethan picked up his phone and called Marco Reyes. "Yo, E, you never call during work hours. Sophie okay?" "Sophie's fine. I need help." "Talk to me." "My boss just invited me to a black tie gala at the Waldorf. Saturday night." Dead silence. Then, "Your boss? The silver spoon prick who doesn't know your kid's name?" "That's the one." "Why?" "Because he thinks it'll be funny to watch me fail." Another silence. Longer this time. Ethan could hear sewing machines humming in Marco's shop. Marco Reyes, tailor, son of a seamstress who'd spent 20 years sewing quinceañera dresses in a Bushwick apartment. Best friends since freshman orientation at Columbia, when they were the only 2 guys on the financial aid floor who didn't pretend to be rich. "I've got $1,200, Ethan said, "and 3 days." "That's not enough." "I know, but I didn't say no." Marco's voice changed, sharpened, the voice he used when someone brought him a challenge worth his talent. "I've got something. A tuxedo, Italian wool, hand-stitched, commissioned by a hedge fund bro who paid half and vanished. It's close to your size. I can make it perfect. How much?" "Nothing." "Marco, shut up, E. You fixed my computers, my website, my taxes, and my daughter's science project for 3 years running. Never let me pay you once. So shut your mouth and let me work." Ethan closed his eyes. "Thank you. Don't thank me. Get here tomorrow, 6 o'clock sharp." "And Ethan? Yeah? We're not making you look like you belong. We're making you look like you built the place." The subway from Manhattan to Queens took 35 minutes. Ethan usually read. Tonight, he studied. Guest lists from last year's gala. Harrington Foundation programs. Senator Chen's education policy papers. Economic analysis of funding gaps in underserved school districts. He already knew most of this. Before the world collapsed into survival mode. Before Claire left. Before every dream got traded for a steady paycheck and health insurance. Ethan had been a software engineer with a Columbia degree and a passion for education technology. He'd built a STEM curriculum prototype that his old boss called brilliant 6 weeks before the startup folded. That knowledge hadn't died. It had just gone underground, like a root system waiting for rain. He got off at his stop, 4 blocks to his father's apartment. He heard Sophie before he saw her. "Daddy!" The door flew open, and 47 pounds of chaos hit him at full speed. Sophie wrapped around his legs like she hadn't seen him in a year, not 8 hours. "Hey, Princess." "Daddy, I got a gold star in math, and Mrs. Patterson said I was the best reader, and Grandpa let me eat cookie dough, and he said don't tell you, but I'm telling you because lies make your stomach hurt." "That's a lot of information for one breath." "I'm efficient. That's the word you taught me. I'm efficient." Frank Calloway appeared in the kitchen doorway, dish towel over his shoulder. 68 years old. Hands like oak. White hair, bad knees, eyes that missed nothing. "She ratted me out on the cookie dough in under 4 seconds, Frank said. "New record." "Thanks for watching her, Dad." "You know I love it." Frank studied Ethan's face. Took about 3 seconds to find what he was looking for. Something happened. "It's nothing." "Ethan Michael Calloway, I changed your diapers and held you up when your mother died. You don't get to, it's nothing, me." "Sophie, go pick out your pajamas." "Is it a secret?" Grown-up conversation. "That's just a secret with extra steps." But she bounced off, already humming. Ethan sat down at the kitchen table. Frank sat across from him. 2 Calloway men in a small kitchen with fluorescent lighting and a crack in the ceiling that had been there since 2019. My boss invited me to a charity gala at the Waldorf, Saturday night. Frank's eyebrows climbed. The Waldorf? Black tie, senators, billionaires, the whole thing. Why? Ethan could have lied, could have kept it professional, kept it clean. But this was his father. Frank Calloway had laid tile in 100-degree heat and framed houses in January sleet, and never once lied to his son about how hard the world was. Because he and his friends think it'll be entertaining to watch me embarrass myself. They're placing bets on it. Frank set down the dish towel. His jaw did the thing, the tightening, the locking, the thing that happened when something hit him right where his principles lived. They're betting on you. Yeah. How much? Thousands. And you said yes. I said yes. Frank was quiet. 10 seconds. 20. Ethan could hear Sophie singing in her room. Something about rainbows. Why? Frank asked. Because I'm done being invisible, Dad. I'm done being the guy people look through. I'm done having my daughter watch her father be a ghost. Frank reached across the table and gripped Ethan's forearm. Not gentle. Iron. The grip of a man who'd held 2x4s in the storm and never let go. Your grandfather built houses during the Depression with his bare hands and an 8th-grade education. Your mother worked 2 jobs until it killed her so you could finish school. We don't come from money. We never will. I know. But we come from something those rich kids will never buy. Grit. The kind you forge when the world beats on you and you get up anyway. The kind that becomes a reflex. Frank squeezed hard enough to leave marks. You go to that gala. You hold your head up. And you show them what a Calloway is made of. I need you to watch Sophie Saturday night. I'll be here. Frank let go. His eyes were wet. He didn't wipe them. Calloway men didn't hide their tears. They just didn't let tears stop them from doing what needed doing. Make your mother proud, son. I will, Dad. 11 o'clock. Sophie was asleep. One arm around her stuffed elephant, mouth open, hair everywhere. Ethan knelt beside her bed the way he did every night. She stirred. Daddy? Go back to sleep, sweetheart. Are you sad? No, princess. I'm getting ready. For what? A party. Her eyes half opened. Like a prince going to a ball? Something like that. You're going to be the handsomest one there. I already know it. She closed her eyes. Love you, Daddy. Love you more. Not possible. She was out in 3 seconds. Ethan stayed kneeling for a long time, listening to her breathe. Then he stood up, walked to the kitchen, opened his laptop. The Harrington Foundation website glowed on the screen. Guest lists, donor histories, policy papers, education statistics. He started reading. He read until 1 in the morning, until 2, until his eyes burned and the coffee went cold and the apartment was so quiet he could hear the buildings settling around him. Somewhere across the river, in a penthouse that cost more than Ethan would earn in 3 lifetimes, Dominic Blackstone was probably asleep in sheets that cost $1,000. Dreaming about the hilarious spectacle waiting for him on Saturday. Let him dream. Ethan closed the laptop and walked to the bathroom. He looked at himself in the mirror. Dark circles under blue-green eyes. 2-day stubble. The face of a man who'd been running on fumes and stubbornness for so long he'd forgotten what rested looked like. But underneath the exhaustion, something else, something hard, something that didn't break. 3 days, he said to his reflection. He turned off the light and went to bed. In the dark, with Sophie breathing softly in the next room and the sounds of queens settling around him, Ethan Calloway made himself a promise. He was going to walk into that ballroom on Saturday night. He was going to stand in the middle of every person who'd ever looked through him. And he was going to make them see him. Not because he wanted their approval, because his daughter thought he was a king. And it was time to prove her right. Marco Reyes was waiting at the door of his shop when Ethan got there at 6 the next evening. He took one look at Ethan's face and shook his head. "You look like you haven't slept." "I slept 4 hours." "That's not sleep. That's a nap with commitment issues." Marco pulled him inside and locked the door behind them. "Sophie?" "With my dad. He's making her spaghetti." "Good, because tonight is about you, and I need your full attention." Marco walked to the back of the shop, past rows of fabric bolts and half-finished garments hanging on wire frames, and pulled a black garment bag from a rack against the wall. He unzipped it slowly, the way a man handles something precious. The tuxedo inside was beautiful. Even Ethan, who knew nothing about fashion, could see that. The fabric was so dark it seemed to absorb light, and when Marco held it up, the weave caught a subtle sheen that made it look alive. "Italian wool," Marco said. "Super 150. Hand-stitched buttonholes, silk lining. The hedge fund guy who ordered this had taste. I'll give him that much. He just didn't have follow-through." He held it against Ethan's chest. Arms out. Ethan extended his arms, and Marco draped the jacket across his shoulders, already frowning in concentration. "Shoulders are good. You've got wider shoulders than finance, bro, which actually helps. Chest is tight. I'll let it out a 1/4 inch here and here." He tugged at the back. "Waist needs to come in. You're leaner than him." "Is that a polite way of saying I'm skinny?" "It's a polite way of saying you skip meals, and I've noticed." Marco pulled the jacket off and draped it over his cutting table. "Try the pants." Ethan changed in the small fitting room. The pants were long, but the waist was surprisingly close. When he stepped out, Marco was already on his knees with pins in his mouth, marking the hem. "You know," Marco said around the pins, "when we were freshmen at Columbia, you were the guy everyone wanted to be. You remember that? Full scholarship, top of every class, girls in the engineering department actually showing up to your study groups, even though half of them weren't in engineering. That was a long time ago." 10 years? That's not a long time. That's just life getting in the way. Marco sat back on his heels and looked up at Ethan. "What happened to that guy?" "He had a kid. His wife left. He needed a paycheck more than a dream." "Wrong. He put his dream on hold so his kid could have a future. There's a difference." Marco stood up and turned Ethan toward the full-length mirror. "Look at yourself." Ethan looked. Even with the pants unhemmed and the jacket on a table behind him, something had shifted. The man in the mirror was standing straighter, jaw set, eyes clear. "You've got the frame," Marco said. 6'2", broad shoulders, good posture when you're not trying to disappear. Your problem has never been how you look. Your problem is you've been dressing like a man who's apologizing for existing." He put a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Saturday night, we fix that." "What about shoes?" Marco grinned. "Funny you should ask." He walked to a shelf and pulled down a box. Inside was a pair of black Oxford shoes, polished to a mirror shine. "My cousin works at a shoe store on 5th Avenue. A customer returned these. Wore them once to a wedding, scuffed the sole, demanded a refund. They cleaned up perfect. Size 11. I'm an 11. I know. I've been your friend for 12 years. I know your shoe size, your coffee order, and the fact that you cry at the end of Field of Dreams, even though you've seen it 30 times. Ethan picked up one of the shoes. The leather was smooth and heavy in his hand. It felt like holding a different life. Marco, I can't let you do all this for nothing. You're not letting me do anything. I'm choosing to, because you do the same for me and we both know it. Marco pulled a small box from his pocket. One more thing. He opened it. Inside was a watch. Not flashy, not covered in diamonds. A classic face. Leather strap, simple and elegant. This was my grandfather's, Marco said. He wore it every Sunday to church in San Juan. He said a man doesn't need an expensive watch. He just needs one that reminds him what time it is to stand up. I can't take your grandfather's watch. You're borrowing it. Big difference. And if you lose it, I'll kill you slowly. Ethan laughed. A real laugh. The first one that wasn't pulled out of him by Sophie in longer than he could remember. Thank you, Marco. Seriously. Thank me by walking into that ballroom and making every rich idiot in the room choke on their champagne. Marco picked up his chalk and turned back to the tuxedo jacket. Now get out of those pants so I can work. I've got 2 days to make you look like God's personal apology to the fashion industry. Ethan changed back into his clothes and sat on the fitting room bench while Marco worked. The shop was quiet, except for the hum of the sewing machine and the occasional sound of Marco muttering measurements to himself. You know what you're going to say to these people? Marco asked without looking up. I've been studying. The foundation, the guests, current policy discussions. I don't mean what you know. I mean what you're going to say when someone tries to make you feel small. Because they will. Rich people always test. Ethan was quiet for a moment. I'll handle it. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got right now. Marco stopped sewing and looked at him. Listen to me. You're the smartest person I've ever met. You can talk about anything. Economics, technology, education, baseball, philosophy. You read more books in a month than most people read in a year. But when you walk into that room, none of that matters if you don't believe you belong there. I'm not sure I do belong there. Nobody belongs anywhere, man. Belonging isn't something you're born into. It's something you claim. Those billionaires don't belong there any more than you do. They just decided they did, and everyone went along with it. Marco went back to his stitching. So decide, right now, that you belong. Ethan sat with that for a long time. 20 blocks south and 40 stories up, Dominic Blackstone was sitting alone in his penthouse doing something he rarely did, thinking about someone who wasn't himself. The group chat was blowing up. Preston had changed the name from Single Dad Watch 2025 to Gala Comedy Hour and was posting mock dress codes, cargo shorts, clip-on ties, sneakers with a suit. Victoria had found Ethan's LinkedIn profile and screenshotted it with crying, laughing emojis. Miles was taking side bets on how many minutes before Ethan mentioned his daughter. Dominic hadn't responded in hours. His phone rang. Nathan Zhao, the only person in his life who consistently told him the truth, even when the truth was ugly. You're being quiet in the group chat, Nathan said. Having second thoughts? No, just busy. Liar. I can hear guilt through the phone. It has a very specific frequency. I don't feel guilty. Dom, I've known you since we were 18. You feel guilty. You're just not used to the sensation, so you're probably confusing it with indigestion. Dominic walked to the window. The city sparkled below him, millions of lives he'd never think about, spread across boroughs he'd never visit. It's just a party, Nate. No, it's not. It's a setup. You invited a decent man to a firing squad and called it entertainment. You don't even know him. I know enough. I know he shows up early every day. I know he handled the Nakamura account crisis last quarter when your entire team fell apart. I know he has a kid, and he's raising her alone. And he still manages to keep your schedule running like clockwork. What do you actually know about him? The question landed harder than Dominic expected. He opened his mouth to answer and realized he had almost nothing. Ethan Calloway, assistant, efficient, quiet. Divorced? Widowed? He didn't know. Kid's name? Didn't know. Where he lived? Somewhere in Queens. That was it. 2 years of working together, and Dominic's total knowledge of the man amounted to a job title and a borough. "That's what I thought," Nathan said into the silence. "Dom, you can still call this off." "The guys would never let me hear the end of it." "Since when do you care what Preston and Miles think?" "Preston's trust fund has a trust fund. He's never had an original thought in his life. And Victoria's only in this because she wants you to see her as fun and spontaneous, which, believe me, she is neither." "It's already done. He said yes." "Then at least be decent to him Saturday night. Don't let them eat him alive." "Why do you care so much about my assistant?" Nathan was quiet for a beat. "Because last month I was in your office picking up the Beijing contracts, and Ethan was at his desk. It was 7 at night. He was eating a granola bar for dinner because he'd worked through lunch to finish your presentation. And he had a photo on his desk of a little girl in a school uniform giving the camera a thumbs up. And I thought, that's a guy who works twice as hard as anyone in this building and gets treated like furniture. And it bothered me." "You never said anything." "I'm saying it now. Don't be the villain in this story, Dom. You've got enough money to be anything you want. Try being a person." Nathan hung up. Dominic set his phone on the counter and poured himself a whiskey. The apartment was massive and silent. 3,000 square feet of Italian marble and custom furniture and art that cost more than houses. Not a single photograph on any surface. Not one personal item that suggested anyone actually lived here. He thought about what Nathan said. Try being a person. When was the last time he'd been a person? Not a CEO, not a billionaire, not America's most eligible. Just a person. His parents had died when he was 24. Car accident on the Long Island Expressway. Both killed instantly. His father had been brilliant and cold. The kind of man who could close $1 billion deal and forget his son's birthday in the same week. His mother had been beautiful and absent, so consumed by the demands of high society that she outsourced her affection to nannies and tutors, and eventually just stopped pretending altogether. Dominic inherited everything: the company, the money, the penthouse, the emptiness. He'd filled it the way rich people fill emptiness, with things, cars, watches, trips, women who stayed until the novelty wore off. Friends like Preston and Miles and Victoria, who laughed at his jokes because he paid for dinner. A social life that looked incredible from the outside and felt like absolutely nothing from the inside. And now he was paying for entertainment by humiliating a man who had done nothing wrong except be poor in his presence. Dominic drained his whiskey and poured another. He pulled up Ethan's employee file on his laptop. Columbia University, full scholarship. BS in software engineering, summa cum laude. Previous employment? 3 years at a tech startup as lead developer. Reason for leaving? Company dissolved. References described him as exceptionally intelligent, reliable beyond measure, and the kind of employee who makes everyone around him better. Employee of the month 3 times in his first year at Blackstone. 0 complaints. 0 sick days. 0 requests for time off except for 2 afternoons marked daughter, school event. Dominic stared at that note. Daughter, school event. He tried to imagine Ethan sitting in a tiny chair at a school assembly, watching a 7-year-old sing or recite a poem or receive a certificate. He tried to imagine what that felt like, Having someone in the world who needed you that much, who loved you that completely. He couldn't. He had no frame of reference for that kind of love. He closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a long time. Friday morning. Ethan was at Marco's shop by 6 a.m. before work. The tuxedo was almost done. Marco had stayed up half the night finishing the alterations, and the result was remarkable. "Try it on," Marco said. "Everything. Shirt, pants, jacket, shoes, the full thing." Ethan dressed carefully, the way Marco had shown him. Shirt first, buttoned from bottom to top, tucked precisely. Pants sitting smooth against the shoes. Jacket settling onto his shoulders like it had been waiting for him. He turned to the mirror. "Jesus," he said softly. "Right?" Marco was grinning. "You clean up like a movie star, E. I always told you." The man in the mirror was almost unrecognizable. Not because he looked like someone else, but because he looked like himself. The real version. The version that had been buried under exhaustion and cheap clothing, and years of making himself smaller so he wouldn't bother anyone. The suit fit like it had been made for him, because now it had been. The shoulders sat perfectly. The waist was trim. The pants broke at exactly the right point above the shoes. Everything was clean, sharp, precise. But it was more than the clothes. It was what the clothes allowed him to see. Broad shoulders he'd been hunching for years. A jawline he'd been hiding behind 2 days' stubble. Eyes that looked different when they weren't apologizing. One more thing. Marco picked up a pair of scissors and gestured toward the barber chair he kept in the corner for loyal customers. "Sit down." "You cut hair too?" "I cut everything. I'm Puerto Rican. It's in the blood." 20 minutes later, Ethan's hair was transformed. Short on the sides, longer on top, styled clean and sharp. It changed his entire face, made him look younger, stronger, more alert. "Now the watch." Marco fastened his grandfather's timepiece around Ethan's wrist. "Look." Ethan looked. For the first time in years, he didn't see an exhausted single dad who was barely getting by. He saw a man, a real man, someone who could walk into any room in the world and not apologize for taking up space. "How do you feel?" Marco asked. "Like I've been wearing a costume for 5 years, and I just took it off." "Good. Now let's talk about tomorrow night." Marco pulled up a chair. "I know you've been studying the guest list and the foundation and all that, but I want to talk about something else. I want to talk about what you do when someone comes at you." "Comes at me how?" "Rich people are passive-aggressive ninjas, E. They don't insult you to your face. They wrap it in a compliment and wait for you to unwrap it in public." "Oh, what an interesting suit. Is it vintage?" Translation: "It looks old." "How brave of you to come alone." Translation: "Where's your real date?" "Your daughter must be so proud." Translation: "Let's remind everyone you're a single parent who doesn't belong here." "So, what do I do?" You stay calm, you stay gracious, and you hit back so elegantly that they don't realize they've been hit until they're lying on the floor wondering what happened. Marco leaned forward. The secret isn't being richer than them or better dressed than them. The secret is being more real than them. These people spend their entire lives performing. They've forgotten what authenticity looks like. When they see it, it scares the hell out of them. "What if I freeze up?" "You won't." "You don't know that." "Yeah, I do. Because I've watched you handle a screaming toddler with an ear infection at 3 a.m. and still show up to work the next morning with every report finished. If you can survive Sophie's terrible twos, you can survive a room full of rich people." Ethan laughed despite himself. "Fair point. One more thing." Marco's voice got serious. Whatever happens tomorrow night, whatever they say, whatever they do, remember why you're going. You're not going to prove anything to them. You're going because that little girl at home thinks her daddy is a king. And kings don't hide. Ethan was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded. Kings don't hide, he repeated. He changed back into his regular clothes, and Marco hung the tuxedo carefully in a fresh garment bag. I'll drop this at your place tomorrow afternoon, 3 o'clock. That gives you plenty of time to shower, change, and practice looking devastating. Marco? Yeah? I don't have the words for what this means to me. You don't need words, brother. Just go in there tomorrow and be who you've always been. That's more than enough. They hugged. The kind of hug that men give each other when they've been through enough together that pretending to be tough is pointless. Ethan rode the subway home. The train was crowded with Friday evening commuters, and he stood holding the overhead rail, swaying with the rhythm of the car. Around him, people stared at their phones, dozed against windows, read books with cracked spines. Normal people living normal lives, heading home to normal apartments. Tomorrow, he would step out of this world and into another one. A world of crystal and champagne, and people who measured worth in zeros on a bank statement. But tonight, he was going home to his daughter. Frank met him at the door. Sophie's been asking for you every 10 minutes since 4 o'clock. I told her you were at the store. She asked what you were buying. I said bread. She said we already have bread. The kid's a prosecutor. Ethan found Sophie in her room, arranging her stuffed animals in what appeared to be a courtroom. The elephant was the judge. Daddy, Mr. Elephant says Bunny stole Teddy's cookie, but Bunny says he didn't do it, and I have to decide who's telling the truth. What's the evidence? There are crumbs on Bunny's face. Sounds like a strong case. That's what I said. She looked up at him. Daddy, is your party tomorrow? Yeah, Princess. Tomorrow night. Are you nervous? He sat down on the floor next to her. A little bit. Why? Because there will be a lot of important people there, and I want to do a good job. Sophie picked up the stuffed elephant and put it in Ethan's lap. Mr. Elephant says you don't have to be nervous because you're the bravest person he knows. Mr. Elephant said that? Uh-huh. And he's a judge, so he knows things. Ethan pulled her into his lap alongside the elephant. She smelled like shampoo and cookies, and the particular sweetness that only existed in children who were completely, unconditionally loved. Daddy? Yeah? Promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll dance at least one dance, because princes always dance at the ball. I promise. And promise me you'll come home and tell me everything, every single thing. I promise. And promise me you'll remember that you're the best daddy in the whole world, and nobody is better than you. Nobody. Ethan held her tighter. His throat ached. His eyes burned. I promise, Sophie. She fell asleep in his arms 20 minutes later, mid-sentence about why elephants should be allowed to be judges. He carried her to bed, tucked the blanket around her, placed the elephant in the crook of her arm. Then he stood in her doorway and watched her breathe. Tomorrow night, he would walk into a room full of people who thought he was nothing, who had bet money on his humiliation, who saw him as entertainment, as a punchline, as a man who didn't matter. But right now, in this room, he was everything. He was the whole world to a 7-year-old girl who thought he was braver than an elephant judge and more handsome than a prince. And that was enough. That had always been enough. He just needed the rest of the world to see it. The black car pulled up to Ethan's building at exactly 7 o'clock. He saw it from the window, sleek, polished, completely out of place on his street in Queens, where the usual traffic was delivery trucks and yellow cabs with dented fenders. The driver stepped out, checked his phone, and looked up at the building like he wasn't sure he had the right address. "Daddy, your ride is here!" Sophie pressed her face against the glass, fogging it with her breath. "It's so fancy!" "Is it a limousine?" "Just a car, Princess." "It's the fanciest car I've ever seen. Even fancier than Uncle Marco's van, and he has fuzzy dice." Frank stood behind them, arms crossed, doing that thing where he was trying not to get emotional and failing badly. He'd been quiet since Ethan came out of the bedroom in the tuxedo 20 minutes ago. Hadn't said a word, just looked at him for a long time, with something in his eyes that Ethan couldn't quite name. "Dad, you okay?" Frank cleared his throat. "You look like your mother's prom date. The one she should have picked instead of me." He tried to laugh. It came out rough. "She'd be losing her mind right now if she could see you." "Dad." "Go, before I embarrass both of us." Sophie grabbed Ethan's hand and pulled him down to her eye level. She was wearing her pajamas, the ones with the elephants, and her hair was already escaping its ponytail. "Daddy, I need to tell you something important."
"What is it?"
She put both hands on his face, the way she did when she wanted to make absolutely sure he was listening. Her small fingers were warm against his jaw. "You look like a superhero, but not the kind with a cape. The kind that saves people just by being brave." Ethan's throat closed. He pulled her into a hug so tight she squeaked. "I'll be home before you wake up," he said. "Promise?" "Promise." "And you'll tell me everything?" "Every single thing." "Even the boring parts?" "Especially the boring parts." She kissed his cheek, leaving the slightly sticky mark that he didn't wipe off until he was in the elevator. Then he wiped it off carefully and wished he hadn't. The driver opened the car door without a word. Ethan slid into the back seat. Leather. Cool air. The faint smell of something expensive. His phone buzzed immediately. "Marco. Go get him, King. And don't sit down too fast. The crease in those pants took me 45 minutes. Ethan smiled and put the phone away. The car merged onto the expressway toward Manhattan, and he watched Queens disappear behind him through the tinted window. His neighborhood. His world. Getting smaller in the rearview mirror. He flexed his hands on his knees. They were steady. His heart was not. The drive took 35 minutes. 35 minutes to cross from one universe to another. The car turned onto Park Avenue, and the world changed. Wider sidewalks, cleaner buildings, people who walked like they owned the ground underneath them. When the Waldorf came into view, Ethan saw the red carpet first, then the photographers, then the line of vehicles ahead of them. Rolls-Royces, Bentleys, a Maybach, unloading passengers who stepped out like they were born under flashbulbs. The car stopped. The driver came around and opened the door. Ethan didn't move for 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, every voice he'd ever internalized tried to speak at once.
"You don't belong here. You're going to humiliate yourself. They're going to see right through you. Go home. Go back to Queens. Go back to being invisible." Then one more voice, small, certain, sticky-fingered. "You look like a superhero, Daddy." Ethan stepped out of the car. The cool evening air hit his face, and he straightened to his full height. 6'2" in Marco's grandfather's shoes, shoulders back, chin level. The tuxedo moved with him like a second skin. The watch caught the light from the hotel entrance. He walked toward the door. A photographer turned, camera up by reflex, and stopped. Lowered the camera. Looked again. Raised it and fired 3 shots in rapid succession. The sound drew the attention of 2 more photographers,
who turned and did the same thing. Ethan didn't pose, didn't slow down, didn't speed up. He just walked, the way Marco had told him. Don't perform. Just move like you know where you're going, and you're in no rush to get there.
The doorman opened the glass doors. "Good evening, sir. Welcome." "Thank you," Ethan said, and his voice was calm, and he was grateful for that. The lobby was full. Everywhere he looked, gowns, tuxedos, diamonds, the particular polish that money buys. Conversations hummed at a frequency that sounded like wealth itself. Waiters moved through the crowd with champagne on silver trays. Ethan walked to the reception line. A woman with a clipboard and a headset was checking names. "Good evening, Ethan Calloway. I'm with the Blackstone party." She scanned her list, smiled. "Of course, Mr. Calloway. Mr. Blackstone is already inside. Please, go right in." He thanked her and turned toward the ballroom entrance. Two massive doors opened wide, spilling golden light and music into the corridor. He stopped at the threshold, took one breath, then he walked through. The ballroom was enormous and packed, but Ethan didn't register the chandeliers or the flowers or the orchestra. He registered the silence. The immediate spreading silence that rippled out from the doors like a stone dropped in water. Heads turned. Conversations died mid-word. A woman holding the champagne glass stopped it halfway to her lips and just stared. Ethan kept walking. "Who is that?" someone said, not quietly enough. "I don't know. I've never seen him before. He looks like he just walked off a film set. Is he with someone?" More heads turning. More whispers. A man straightened his tie self-consciously. A woman touched her hair. The attention moved through the room like a wave, and Ethan felt every bit of it. But he didn't react. He just walked, steady and unhurried, his eyes scanning the crowd. He found Dominic in 4 seconds. Near the bar, black tuxedo, glass in hand, surrounded by Preston, Victoria, and Miles. The whole crew, positioned like they were waiting for a show. They got one, just not the one they expected. Dominic saw him first. His champagne glass stopped moving. His lips parted. His eyes went wide. Genuinely wide. Not performed surprise, but the real thing. The kind of shock that can't be faked. Preston saw him next. The smirk died on his face like someone had switched it off. Victoria's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. Miles set down his drink with a sharp click, as if he'd forgotten he was holding it. Ethan walked toward them. Every step clicked softly on the marble floor. The crowd parted slightly, instinctively, the way people make room for someone who looks like they matter. He stopped in front of Dominic, close enough to shake hands. Close enough to see the shock still trying to find somewhere to land on Dominic's face. "Good evening, Dominic," Ethan said. "Thank you for the invitation." Dominic stared. 5 full seconds of silence. Then he blinked, swallowed, and attempted to recover. "Ethan, I barely recognized you. You said it was formal." "I did. I just didn't expect—" Dominic stopped himself. What was he going to say? "I didn't expect you to look like this? I didn't expect you to walk in here like you owned the building? I didn't expect to feel like the joke was suddenly on me?" "You look great," Dominic managed. It came out almost honest. "Thank you. So do you." Ethan's tone was polite, professional, the exact same tone he used at the office when handing over quarterly reports. The familiarity of it seemed to rattle Dominic more than anything else. Preston recovered first, because Preston always recovered first. It was easy to bounce back from anything when nothing had ever really knocked you down.
Well, well, Ethan. I almost didn't recognize you without the... He gestured vaguely. You know, the work look. The work look serves its purpose, Ethan replied evenly. Different occasions call for different presentations. I'm sure you understand that, Preston. It was a nothing statement. Perfectly pleasant.
But something in the delivery, the calmness, the eye contact, the complete absence of deference, made Preston's smile flicker. Victoria stepped forward. She was wearing something silver that probably cost more than Ethan's annual rent, and she was looking at him with an expression he'd never seen directed at himself before. Interest. Actual interest. Ethan, I don't think we've been properly introduced outside of the office. I'm Victoria Langford. I know who you are, Victoria. We've met several times when you visited Dominic's office. He shook her extended hand with exactly the right amount of pressure and exactly the right duration. It's nice to see you in a more relaxed setting. The comment was gracious and slightly pointed at the same time, a reminder that he knew exactly who she was and had been in the room the whole time she'd been ignoring him. Victoria's smile became uncertain. "Can I get you a drink?" Dominic asked, seemingly grateful for something to do. "Scotch, neat, thank you." They moved toward the bar, and Ethan could feel the group rearranging itself around him, trying to figure out how to handle this development. This was not the Ethan Calloway they'd prepared for. The fumbling, awkward, out-of-his-depth single dad they'd been anticipating was nowhere to be found. In his place was a man who accepted his scotch with a nod, took a measured sip, and looked completely at ease. Mr. Blackstone. An older man in a distinguished gray suit approached their group. "Wonderful event, as always." "Senator Chen," Dominic said. "Thank you for coming. Allow me to introduce..." "Ethan Calloway," Ethan said, extending his hand before Dominic could frame the introduction. "It's a pleasure, Senator. I've followed your work on the STEM Education Access Act with great interest." Senator Margaret Chen, 72 years old, 4 terms in office, famously difficult to impress, took his hand and looked at him with sharp eyes. "You're familiar with the bill?" "I am, particularly the provisions for after-school programming in Title I schools, though I think there's a gap in the implementation framework that could be addressed with public-private tech partnerships." The senator's eyebrows rose a full inch. "What kind of gap?" "The bill allocates funding for hardware and curriculum development, which is essential, but it doesn't account for the scheduling realities of working families. A STEM program that runs 3 to 5 p.m. doesn't help a single parent who works until 6. And online alternatives require broadband access that many low-income areas still don't have." "How do you know this?" "Because I'm a single father in Queens, and I've spent the last 3 years trying to find after-school programs that actually work for families like mine. The gap isn't theoretical for me. It's Tuesday." Senator Chen stared at him. Then she laughed, a real laugh, surprised and delighted. "That might be the most useful piece of testimony I've heard in 20 years, and I heard it at a cocktail party." She turned to Dominic. "Where have you been hiding this man?" Dominic opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. He works with me at Blackstone." "In what capacity? Policy? Government relations?" The question hung in the air. This was the moment, the trap door. All Dominic had to do was say, "He's my assistant," and the spell would break. Everything Ethan had built in the last 5 minutes would collapse. Ethan watched Dominic's face, watched him calculate, watched the decision happen in real time. "Ethan is one of our most valuable team members," Dominic said carefully. "His insights on technology and education have been instrumental in shaping our community initiatives." It wasn't a lie, exactly. But it wasn't the truth, either. And the fact that Dominic chose not to say assistant, that he chose in this moment to protect rather than expose, told Ethan something complicated,
that he filed away for later. "Well, Mr. Calloway," Senator Chen said, "I'd very much like to continue this conversation. I'm forming an advisory committee on education technology, and I could use someone who actually understands what families need. Would you be interested?" "I'd be honored, Senator." "Excellent. I'll have my office contact you Monday." She shook his hand again, firmly. "Don't let Blackstone keep you hidden. The world needs more people who know the difference between policy on paper and policy in practice." She walked away. The silence she left behind had a different texture than the silence before. Heavier, charged with something none of them had anticipated. "Well," Preston said.
That was impressive, Victoria finished, and she sounded like she meant it, which clearly annoyed her.
Dinner was announced, and they moved to their table near the front of the ballroom. Ethan found himself seated between Dominic and a venture capitalist named David Morrison, directly across from Victoria, who was watching him the way a cat watches something it can't quite figure out. The first course arrived. Ethan picked up the correct fork without hesitation. He'd practiced at his kitchen table with Sophie, who had turned it into a game. "This is the salad fork, Daddy, and this is the dinner fork, and this is the tiny one for stabbing your enemies." David Morrison turned to him. "Calloway, I don't think I've seen you at these events before." "First time." "What's your area?" "Technology and education. I have a background in software engineering, Columbia, and a particular interest in how technology can close the achievement gap in underserved communities."
Columbia, good school. What firm are you with? I work with Blackstone Enterprises. Ah, Dom's shop. What division? Another trapdoor. Ethan could feel Victoria lean forward slightly, waiting for the reveal. "I've been working closely with Dominic for the past 2 years," Ethan said, "though I'm increasingly focused on social impact initiatives, particularly around STEM education." "True. Vague. Bulletproof." "Fascinating. We've been looking at impact investing in ed tech. What's your thesis on the space?" And just like that, Ethan was in a real conversation about something he actually knew. He talked about adaptive learning platforms, about the data showing that personalized technology could close reading gaps by 2 grade levels in a single school year, about the infrastructure challenges in rural and urban low-income areas. Morrison was hooked. This is exactly the kind of ground-level analysis we never get from the pitch decks. Everyone talks about scale. Nobody talks about whether the damn Wi-Fi works, because the people building the platforms have never lived in a neighborhood where the Wi-Fi doesn't work, Ethan said. "I have." Patricia Whitman, seated 2 chairs down, leaned in. "Excuse me, did you just say you've experienced the digital divide personally?" "I'm raising a 7-year-old in Queens. Her school had 12 tablets for 300 students last year. She got 45 minutes of screen time per week for her entire education technology curriculum. So yes, I've experienced it personally." Patricia put down her fork. "Mr. Calloway, I chair a foundation focused on childhood education equity. We've been struggling to connect our funding priorities to actual family experiences. Would you be willing to consult with us? I'd welcome the opportunity." 2 invitations. 2 legitimate, high-level invitations from people who actually mattered. And the dinner salad hadn't even been cleared. Ethan could feel something shifting at the table, a gravitational realignment. He was no longer a curiosity or a question mark. He was becoming the most interesting person in the conversation. And for Preston, Victoria, and Miles, that was not part of the plan. Victoria made her move during the main course. "So, Ethan." Her voice was casual, light, perfectly calibrated. "It must be challenging, balancing such ambitious professional interests with single parenthood. How do you manage it all?" It was elegant. On the surface, a compliment. Underneath, a probe. A reminder to everyone at the table that he was a single dad, alone, probably struggling,
Definitely not one of them. It is challenging, Ethan said. But my daughter is the reason I care about education in the first place. She's the reason any of this matters to me. So I don't see it as a balance. I see it as the same thing. How sweet, Victoria smiled. And her mother? Is she involved? The table went quiet. Even Morrison stopped chewing. It was a cruel question, personal and pointed, designed to expose vulnerability. Ethan set down his fork. He looked at Victoria directly, and for the first time all evening, he let something real show in his eyes. Not anger, not pain, something harder than both. Her mother made a choice. I made a different one. I chose to stay. The silence was absolute. Not everyone has the courage to stay when things get hard, Ethan continued, his voice steady. But those of us who do, we know what we're made of, and we don't owe anyone an explanation for it. Patricia Whitman set down her wine glass. That, she said quietly, is the most honest thing anyone has said at one of these dinners in 20 years. Victoria's smile cracked. She reached for her champagne and didn't ask Ethan another question for the rest of the meal. Preston tried next, during the dessert course. Blunter, less skilled.
So Ethan, what does a guy like you drive? I just picked up a new Porsche Taycan, electric, incredible machine. I take the subway, Ethan said. 35 minutes, door to door. I use the time to read. The subway. Preston's voice dripped with something he probably thought was subtle. How practical. It is practical. Last week I finished Piketty's latest book on the E-train. The week before, I got through 2 chapters of a biography of Robert Moses while stuck between stations at 34th Street. Captive audience, guaranteed reading time. It's actually one of the most productive parts of my day. Morrison laughed out loud. I spend 90 minutes a day in the back of a town car staring at my phone. Maybe I should take the subway. You should, Ethan said. You'd be amazed what you learn about a city when you're actually in it. Preston had nothing for that. He looked down at his plate and pushed a piece of cake around with his fork. The charity auction began after dinner. Item after item sold for numbers that made Ethan's head spin. A vacation package for $40,000. A private dinner with a celebrity chef for $25,000. Artwork that went for 6 figures. Then the auctioneer announced something different. Our next item is particularly close to the Foundation's mission. We're offering the opportunity to sponsor a full classroom technology upgrade for one Title I school. Starting bid, $15,000. The room shifted. This was the least glamorous item of the night. No luxury vacation, no celebrity experience. Just desks, tablets, and Wi-Fi for kids who didn't have them. Nobody raised a paddle. The auctioneer waited. $15,000 to change a classroom. Do I have an opening bid? Silence. Ethan looked around the table. Morrison was checking his phone. Preston was talking to a woman at the next table. Victoria was reapplying lipstick. Hundreds of people in this room, collectively worth more than some countries, and not one of them was willing to raise a hand for a classroom full of kids. Ethan raised his hand. The auctioneer turned. We have interest from... Sir, are you bidding? Not exactly, Ethan said, and his voice carried farther than he expected. The conversations around him dimmed. I can't bid $15,000, but I can offer 200 hours of my time. I'm a software engineer by training, and I've taught coding workshops for kids in Queens. I'll volunteer a full year of weekly classes for that classroom, if someone in this room will fund the technology they need to learn on. Dead silence. Then David Harrington stood up.
Ethan hadn't even realized the foundation chairman was at the next table. Tall, silver-haired, with the quiet authority of a man who had spent his life giving money away. "That's the most meaningful bid I've heard tonight," Harrington said, "and I'll match it with $30,000 in technology funding." The room erupted. Not polite applause, real applause. The kind that comes from people who have just been reminded why they were supposed to be here in the first place. Ethan sat back down. His hands were trembling under the table. Dominic was staring at him with an expression Ethan had never seen on his face. Not shock anymore. Not amusement. Not calculation. Something raw. Something almost like shame. "You didn't have to do that," Dominic said quietly. "Yeah," Ethan said. "I did." The evening continued. People found reasons to approach Ethan. Handshakes, business cards, invitations to lunch, requests for his perspective on education, technology, community investment. Each conversation built on the last, and Ethan handled them all with the same quiet confidence that had carried him through the door. But underneath the composure, something was building. He could feel it every time he caught Preston whispering to Miles, every time Victoria's eyes tracked him across the room, every time he remembered the sound of their laughter through that conference room door. They hadn't given up. He could feel it. They were regrouping, recalculating, looking for a new angle. The blow came from a direction he didn't expect. He was standing near the bar, talking with Morrison about a potential EdTech incubator, when a woman in a red gown appeared at Dominic's side. Tall, blonde, sharp-featured, moving through the crowd with the practiced ease of someone who had been navigating these rooms since birth. "Dominic, darling," she kissed him on both cheeks. "I wasn't going to come tonight, but Daddy insisted." Her eyes swept across the group and landed on Ethan. "And who's this? I don't think we've met." "Sloan Beaumont," Dominic said, and something in his voice shifted. Tighter, guarded. "This is Ethan Calloway." "Calloway." She said the name like she was testing its weight. "I don't know any Calloways." "What family are you with?" "My own," Ethan said. "Small but fierce." Sloan smiled the way a knife smiles when it catches light. "How charming. Dominic, darling, is this the—" She glanced at Victoria, who gave a barely perceptible nod. Oh, I see." The smile widened. "You're the one from the group chat." Everything stopped. Dominic's face went white. "Sloan. Preston showed me. Single dad watch. Very creative. Though I have to say," she looked Ethan up and down, "he cleans up better than expected. Like a rescue dog after a good grooming." The words hit the nearby tables. Heads turned. Conversations paused. Phone screens lit up. "That's enough," Dominic said sharply. "Oh, relax. It's all in good fun. Isn't that what you said? Harmless fun? I'm just giving the audience what they came for." Sloan turned back to Ethan, tilting her head like she was studying something under glass. "So tell me, Ethan, how does it feel to be the entertainment?" Ethan looked at her. Then at Dominic. Then at Preston, Victoria, Miles, all frozen, all watching, all caught between the cruelty they'd started and the consequences they hadn't planned for. The ballroom was quiet. Phones were raised, dozens of screens recording, capturing, waiting for whatever happened next. Ethan set down his glass, slowly, carefully. The soft click of crystalline marble was the loudest sound in the room. And then he did the last thing any of them expected. He smiled. "Yeah," Ethan said, "I know about the bet." The words landed like a grenade with the pin already pulled. Sloane's smile faltered. Preston took a half step back. Victoria's hand tightened around her champagne glass. "I've known since Tuesday," Ethan continued. His voice was calm, not performed calm, the real kind, the kind that comes from a man who has already survived the worst moment and is standing on the other side of it. "I was bringing quarterly reports to Dominic's office when I heard everything. The group chat, the betting pool, the part about my super-glued shoes, the part about how it would be hilarious to watch me realize I don't belong." Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The silence had weight. It pressed down on the crowd like a physical thing. Sloane recovered first, because cruelty is quick on its feet. "Well then why on earth did you come? If you knew it was a setup, why walk into it?" "Because I have a 7-year-old daughter at home." "What does your daughter have to do with—" "Everything. She has everything to do with it." Ethan's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "Her name is Sophie. She's in 2nd grade. She drew me a picture last week. Me wearing a crown, standing next to a castle made of hearts. At the bottom she wrote, 'My daddy is the king of our house.'" He paused. Let it sit. Every phone in the vicinity was recording, and he didn't care. "She thinks I'm brave," he said. "She thinks I'm the strongest person in the world, and I decided that I would rather walk into a room full of people who are laughing at me and hold my head up than go home and be the kind of father who hides when things get hard." Patricia Whitman put her hand over her mouth. David Morrison set down his glass. Senator Chen, who had been approaching the bar, stopped and turned. "So yes, Sloane, I'm the entertainment. I'm the joke. I'm the broke single dad from Queens who fixes his shoes with superglue and takes the subway and eats granola bars for dinner because he gave his daughter the last real meal. I'm everything you and your friends find amusing." Ethan looked directly at Dominic. "But I'm also the guy who showed up. And I think that says more about me than this entire evening says about any of you." The silence that followed was the kind that changes rooms. Not uncomfortable silence. Something deeper. The silence of people being forced to look at themselves and not liking what they see. Sloane opened her mouth, but nothing came out. For the first time in her life, she had been outmatched by someone she considered beneath her, and she had no protocol for it. David Harrington stepped forward from the crowd. The foundation chairman had been watching from 10 feet away, and his face carried an expression that Ethan couldn't read. Something between fury and admiration. "Did I just hear correctly?" Harrington said, his voice cutting through the room with the authority of a man who had been powerful for so long that he no longer needed to raise his voice to command attention. "A group of guests at my foundation's charity event, an event dedicated to helping underprivileged children, invited a single father as a joke? To humiliate him? At a gala for children?" The irony was devastating, and Harrington clearly intended it to be. Preston went pale. "Mr. Harrington, it wasn't like—" "I have a group chat screenshot being passed around this room right now, young man. Single Dad Watch 2025. Your name is on it. So is yours." He looked at Victoria. "And yours. Miles. And yours. Dominic." Harrington turned to the broader crowd. This man just volunteered 200 hours of his time to teach children how to code. While these 4 were betting on his humiliation. I want everyone in this room to think very carefully about what that says about who actually belongs here tonight. The applause started at Senator Chen's table. Slow at first. Then it spread. Across the ballroom, table by table, person by person, until the sound filled the room. Not polite applause. The kind of applause that means something. The kind that acknowledges not a performance, but a person. Ethan stood in the middle of it, and for one terrible, beautiful moment, he almost broke. His eyes burned, his throat ached. His hands, hidden at his sides, trembled in a way that nobody could see. But he didn't break. He nodded once, a simple acknowledgement, and the gesture was so understated and genuine that it only made the applause louder. Dominic hadn't moved. He stood exactly where he'd been when Sloane dropped the bomb, and his face was doing something Ethan had never seen in 2 years. It was crumbling. Not dramatically, not with tears or theatrics. Just a slow collapse of every wall he'd built, every mask he'd worn, every carefully constructed layer of confidence and control falling away to reveal what was underneath. And what was underneath was a man who knew he'd done something unforgivable and couldn't figure out how to live with it. Dominic. Ethan's voice was quiet enough that only the two of them could hear. Not here. Later. But Dominic shook his head. No. Here. Now. He turned to face the crowd. His hands were shaking. Ethan noticed because he had never seen Dominic Blackstone's hands shake. Not during billion-dollar negotiations, not during board meetings that went sideways. Not once. "I need to say something," Dominic said. His voice cracked on the second word, and he didn't try to hide it. "Ethan is right. Everything he said is right. I invited him tonight because my friends and I thought it would be funny. I thought, that watching him try to fit into our world would be entertaining." The crowd was utterly still. "I want you to know what this man has done for me in 2 years. He managed my schedule, my correspondence, my crises. He saved a $200 million deal last quarter by staying up until 4 in the morning fixing a server crash that my entire tech team couldn't handle. He has never been late. He has never complained. He has never asked for a single thing beyond his salary." Dominic's voice was getting rougher. He wasn't performing. This wasn't a speech he'd prepared. It was a man coming apart at the seams in real time. "And you know what I knew about him? Nothing. I didn't know his daughter's name. I didn't know he graduated summa cum laude from Columbia on a full scholarship. I didn't know he was a software engineer who gave up his career to raise his child alone. I didn't know his mother worked herself to death so he could go to college. I didn't know any of it. Because I never asked. Not once in 2 years." He turned to Ethan. "I invited you tonight to humiliate you, and instead, you've humiliated me. Not by trying to, by just being who you are. And I'm standing here in a tuxedo that costs $12,000, realizing that the man in front of me, who borrowed a suit and took the subway, has more class and more courage than I've shown in my entire life." The room was so quiet, Ethan could hear the ice settling in someone's glass 3 tables away. "I'm sorry, Ethan," Dominic said. "Not for the cameras, not because I got caught. Because I did something cruel to a good man, and I don't know how to undo it." Ethan looked at him, really looked at him, past the expensive tuxedo and the styled hair and the gray eyes that were, for the first time, completely unguarded. He saw something he hadn't expected to see. Not just guilt, but grief. The grief of a man who had just realized how empty his life was. How hollow the laughter sounded when it came at someone else's expense. How lonely it was at the top when you got there by stepping on people. "You can't undo it," Ethan said. "But you can do better." "How?" "That's not my problem to solve, Dominic. That's yours." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't absolution. It was something more honest than either. It was the truth, delivered without malice, from a man who had earned the right to say it. Preston stepped forward. His face was the color of old paper. "Ethan, I was part of this too. I know you were, Preston." Ethan's voice was even. Not warm, not cold. Just factual. "I heard you suggest the whole thing." Preston flinched. I'm sorry. I'm genuinely sorry. Okay. That was all Ethan gave him. One word. Preston stood there, waiting for more. For absolution. For a handshake. For some indication that he'd been forgiven. Ethan gave him nothing. Because sorry was easy. Sorry cost nothing. And Ethan had learned a long time ago that the people who hurt you don't get to decide when you heal. Victoria was next. She approached with her arms crossed over her chest, hugging herself, and Ethan realized she was crying. Not sobbing, just tears running silently down her face, cutting tracks through her makeup. "I don't know what to say," she said. "Then don't say anything." "I was horrible." "Yes." "I asked about Sophie's mother because I wanted to embarrass you. I wanted to find the crack and push." "I know." How did you just handle it like that? How were you so calm?" Ethan was quiet for a moment. "Because I've been through worse than a dinner party, Victoria. I've held my daughter while she cried because her mother wasn't coming back. I've sat in a hospital waiting room, not knowing if I could afford the bill. I've worked double shifts on 3 hours of sleep and still read bedtime stories with the voices because that's what she likes. After all that, you think a rude question at a fancy dinner is going to break me?" Victoria pressed her hand against her mouth and turned away. Miles, who had been hovering at the edge of the group, caught Ethan's eye. He didn't approach, didn't apologize, just gave a single, barely perceptible nod. The nod of a man who was ashamed and knew that words wouldn't cover it. Ethan returned the nod. It was enough. Sloane had vanished. She disappeared into the crowd the moment Harrington started speaking, slipping away like smoke, leaving no apology behind. Ethan didn't expect one. Some people would rather disappear than face what they've done. He'd learned that from Claire. Senator Chen appeared at his elbow. "Mr. Calloway, I want you to know that what just happened in this room will not be forgotten. Not by me, and not by anyone else here. I didn't plan for any of this, Senator. I know. That's what makes it so powerful." She put her hand on his arm. "Monday, my office, 10 a.m. We have work to do." "I'll be there." Harrington was next. He shook Ethan's hand with both of his. "The classroom sponsorship stands. And I'd like to discuss something bigger. A full partnership between the foundation and a new program you're going to design. Can you do that?" "I've been designing it in my head for 5 years," Ethan said. "I just never had anyone who wanted to hear it." "I want to hear it. Call my office this week." For the next hour, people found Ethan. Not because he sought them out, because they came to him. Business cards pressed into his hand. Handshakes that lasted longer than protocol. Quiet words of admiration from men and women who had sat in this ballroom year after year, writing checks and sipping champagne, and had never once seen anything as real as what they'd witnessed tonight. A tech CEO wanted to discuss education software. A philanthropist wanted to fund after-school programs. A journalist from the Times wanted an interview. A documentary filmmaker left her card and said she'd been looking for a story exactly like his. Ethan accepted each conversation with the same calm warmth he'd shown all evening. But inside, the adrenaline was fading, and what replaced it was a bone-deep exhaustion that went beyond physical tiredness. He'd been carrying this weight for 3 days. The knowledge of their cruelty, the pressure of transformation, the performance of belonging. And now that the weight was lifting, he could feel how heavy it had been. He found a quiet moment near the terrace doors and checked his phone. 2 messages. Frank. Sophie fell asleep at 8:30 watching Finding Nemo. She made me pause it 3 times to tell me you were at a ball like a prince. How's it going, son? Marco. I can feel a disturbance in the force. Either you're killing it or you're dead. Text me back so I know which one. Ethan typed back to Marco. Still alive. I'll tell you everything tomorrow. To his father. It went okay, Dad. Better than okay. Tell you when I get home. Kiss Sophie for me. He put the phone away and leaned against the wall. Closed his eyes for 10 seconds. Let himself feel it. All of it. The fear he'd swallowed before walking through those doors. The pride of standing his ground when Sloane tried to cut him down. The pain of hearing Dominic describe him as invisible in his own office. The strange, uncomfortable gratitude of watching Dominic break apart in front of everyone. Ethan. He opened his eyes. Dominic was standing 3 feet away, jacket off, tie loosened, looking like a man who'd been in a fight and lost. I know you said it's not your problem to solve, Dominic said. And you're right. But I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. I've been honest with you all night. I know. That's why I'm asking. Dominic ran both hands through his hair, destroying what was left of its styling. Is there anything salvageable here? Between us. Not as boss and employee. I think that's over, and it should be. But as, I don't know, people. Ethan studied him. Why does it matter to you? Because Nathan was right, my business partner. He told me to try being a person. And the truth is, I don't know how. I haven't known how since my parents died. I've been surrounded by people my whole life, and I can't name a single genuine relationship I have. Preston, Miles, Victoria, they're not friends. They're an audience. And I've been performing for them so long, I forgot there was supposed to be something real underneath. That's a lot of self-awareness for one evening. Getting publicly humiliated by your own cruelty is a hell of a motivator. Ethan almost smiled. Almost. You want honest? Please. I don't trust you. Not even close. You spent 2 years treating me like a piece of office equipment, and then you invited me here to be your circus act. One speech doesn't fix that. I know. But, Ethan paused, choosing his next words with the same care he used when explaining difficult things to Sophie. I believe you meant what you said in there. Not because I'm generous. Because I watched your hands. They were shaking. You can fake a lot of things, Dominic. You can't fake shaking hands. Dominic looked down at his hands, as if seeing them for the first time. So here's what I'll give you, Ethan said. I'll give you a chance. 1. Don't come to me with words. Don't send gifts. Don't try to make yourself feel better by writing checks. Come to me with actions. Show me that tonight actually changed something. And not next month, not next quarter. Now. What kind of actions? You're a billionaire, Dominic. You have resources that most people can't even imagine. And tonight you saw, for the first time, what life looks like for people who don't have those resources. So do something about it. Not because it makes good PR. Not because it'll look good in a magazine. Because you actually give a damn. And if I do? Then maybe, eventually, we'll have something worth calling real. But it's going to take time. And you're going to have to earn it. Every day. Dominic nodded slowly. Fair. One more thing. Yeah? Her name is Sophie. She's 7. She likes elephants, drawing, and mac and cheese. She wants to be a scientist. And she thinks I'm a king. Ethan straightened his jacket. Now you know more about me than you've learned in 2 years. That's where the bar starts. He turned and walked back into the ballroom. The gala was winding down. The orchestra was playing something slow and elegant. Couples were on the dance floor, swaying in the soft light. Waiters were clearing the last of the dessert plates. Ethan moved through the crowd, shaking final hands, accepting last business cards, saying goodnight to Senator Chen and David Harrington and Patricia Whitman and all the other people who had, over the course of a single evening, gone from strangers to something like allies. His phone buzzed one more time. Sophie. Or rather, Sophie using Frank's phone, at what must have been a brief waking moment.
Daddy, I waited up, but I fell asleep. Grandpa says you're a rock star. I already knew that. Come home soon. Love you to the moon and the sun and all the stars. And also Pluto, even though it's not a planet anymore.
Ethan read it twice, 3 times. Then he put the phone in his pocket and walked toward the exit. The doorman opened the door. "Good evening, Mr. Calloway. Your car is waiting." "Thank you." He stepped onto the sidewalk. The night air hit his face, cold, sharp, real. The sounds of the city wrapped around him, taxis honking, someone laughing on a street corner, the distant rumble of a subway he could feel through the soles of Marco's borrowed shoes. The driver opened the car door. Ethan slid in. The leather was cool against his back. "Where to, sir?" "Queens," Ethan said. "I'm going home." The car pulled away from the Waldorf and merged into the river of lights that was Manhattan at midnight. Ethan loosened his tie, the first time he'd adjusted anything all evening, and leaned his head back against the seat. He was exhausted, wrung out, emptied of every ounce of adrenaline and composure he'd been running on for the past 5 hours. But underneath the exhaustion, something new was growing. Something that felt like the first warm day after a long winter. Not summer yet, not even spring, just the faintest suggestion that the cold wouldn't last forever. The car crossed the Queensboro Bridge, and Ethan watched the skyline shrink in the back window. All those towers of glass and steel, all those offices and penthouses, all those people who measured life in dollars and status and the cruelty they could get away with. He was going back to a small apartment, a second-hand couch, a refrigerator covered in crayon drawings, a 7-year-old girl who was asleep with a stuffed elephant, and an unshakable belief that her father was the bravest man alive. The car stopped in front of his building. Ethan got out, thanked the driver, and stood on the sidewalk for a moment. His street. His building. His life. He went inside, took the stairs because the elevator was slow, unlocked the door quietly. Frank was asleep on the couch with a book open on his chest. Sophie's door was cracked open, nightlight glowing blue. Ethan changed out of the tuxedo carefully, hanging it on the back of his bedroom door the way Marco would want. He put the watch on his nightstand, set the shoes side by side on the floor. Then he walked to Sophie's room and knelt beside her bed. She was sprawled across the mattress the way she always slept, one arm over the elephant, one leg hanging off the edge, hair everywhere. Her mouth was open. She was snoring softly. "I did it, sweetheart," he whispered. "I went to the ball, and I held my head up the whole time." Sophie stirred, her eyes half opened. "Daddy?" "I'm home." "Did you dance?" He smiled. "I didn't dance." "You promised." "I know. I owe you one." "Okay." She reached out, grabbed his hand, and pulled it against her cheek. "Was it scary?" "A little." "Were you brave?" "I tried to be." "Then you were." She closed her eyes. "That's how it works, Daddy. You just have to try." She was asleep again in seconds, still holding his hand. Ethan knelt there on the floor of his daughter's bedroom, in a small apartment in Queens, and he let the tears come. Not the desperate tears of a man who was broken. The quiet tears of a man who had walked through fire and come out the other side still standing. He stayed there until his knees ached and his eyes were dry. Then he kissed Sophie's forehead, gently freed his hand from hers, and went to bed. He slept better than he had in years. Sunday morning hit different. Ethan woke up to the sound of Sophie singing in the kitchen and the smell of something burning. He stumbled out of bed and found Frank standing over the stove, waving a dish towel at a smoking pan, while Sophie sat on the counter, legs swinging, narrating the disaster like a sportscaster. "And Grandpa has lost control of the pancake. It's going dark. It's going very dark. This could be the end, folks."
"The pancake is fine," Frank said, scraping something black into the trash. "That was a practice pancake." "That's the fourth practice pancake, Grandpa." "I'm a perfectionist." Ethan leaned against the doorframe and watched them. His chest felt strange, lighter than usual, like something heavy had been sitting on it for years, and he'd only just noticed because it was gone. "Daddy!" Sophie launched off the counter and hit him at full speed. "Tell me everything. Tell me about the ball. Were there princesses? Was there cake? Did you dance? You said you didn't dance, but you promised." "I know. I owe you a dance."
"Right now?"
"Right now." He picked her up and they danced around the small kitchen. No music, just Sophie humming something off-key, and Ethan spinning her in circles, while Frank watched from the stove with a spatula in one hand and tears in his eyes that he would deny until his dying day.
"Daddy, you're still the handsomest," Sophie said matter-of-fact, "even in your pajamas."
"Thank you, Princess."
"Now, tell me about the ball."
So he told her. Not everything. She was 7, and some truths were too sharp for small hands. But he told her about the big room with the lights, and the music, and the people in fancy clothes. He told her about Senator Chen, who wanted to help build better schools. He told her about David Harrington, who was going to give computers to kids who didn't have them. He told her about volunteering to teach coding.
"Like when you taught my class?"
Sophie's eyes went wide.
"You're going to teach more kids?"
"A lot more kids."
"That's the best thing I ever heard."
She threw her arms around his neck.
"I'm so proud of you, Daddy."
4 words, from a 7-year-old in elephant pajamas, sitting in a kitchen that smelled like burnt pancakes. And they meant more than every handshake and business card from the night before combined. Frank finally produced an edible pancake and set it in front of Sophie, who drowned it in syrup with the enthusiasm of someone who believed moderation was a myth. Then he sat down across from Ethan, with a cup of coffee and that look, the Frank Calloway look that meant he was about to ask something real. "So, how bad was it?"
"It was rough, Dad. They had a group chat about me, bets on whether I'd embarrass myself. One of them called me a rescue dog."
Frank's jaw did the thing. "And?"
"And I stood there and told a room full of billionaires that my daughter thinks I'm a king, and that's worth more than anything they've got."
Frank set down his coffee. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then he reached across the table and put his hand on Ethan's. "Your mother would have been standing on her chair cheering," he said. "She would have made a scene. You know how she was."
"I know how she was."
"She'd be so proud, son. I'm so proud."
They sat like that for a moment. 2 Calloway men in a small kitchen, holding on to each other the way they'd been holding on since Margaret died. Quietly, firmly, without letting go. The phone call started Monday morning. Senator Chen's office called at 9:15 to confirm the 10 o'clock meeting. David Harrington's assistant called at 9:30 to schedule a lunch. Patricia Whitman emailed a formal invitation to consult with her education foundation. David Morrison left a voicemail about an EdTech investment opportunity. The Times journalist sent a polite request for an interview. Ethan sat at his desk at Blackstone Enterprises. The same desk, the same chair, the same computer, and stared at his phone as it kept buzzing. "You're popular today." That was Karen, the office manager, walking past with a stack of files. She'd worked on the 42nd floor for 12 years, and had always been kind to Ethan in the small, quiet ways that decent people are kind. A coffee left on his desk when he looked tired. A reminder to eat lunch. I saw the video, by the way. The video? Honey, it's everywhere. Someone recorded the whole thing at the gala. You, Dominic's speech, that horrible woman in the red dress. It's got 2 million views on Twitter, and it's not even noon. Ethan pulled up his browser. Karen wasn't exaggerating. The video was everywhere. Cut into clips, shared across platforms, already spawning commentary and think pieces. Single dad stands up to billionaire bullies at charity gala was trending. His face was on news sites he'd never heard of. He closed the browser, opened it again, closed it. His desk phone rang, internal line, Dominic's extension. Ethan, can you come to my office? He walked the familiar route, past the reception area, past the break room, down the corridor to the corner office. The same walk he'd made 1,000 times, carrying reports, schedules, coffee. But today the walk felt different. People looked at him as he passed, not through him, at him. Dominic was standing behind his desk, not sitting. He looked like he hadn't slept. His tie was slightly crooked, which Ethan had never seen in 2 years. Dominic Blackstone's tie was never crooked. Sit down, Dominic said. I'll stand. Dominic nodded, accepting that. I need to say something, and I need you to let me finish before you respond. Go ahead. I've been up all night thinking about what you said, about actions, not words, about earning it. Dominic picked up a folder from his desk and held it out. This is a formal offer, not for your current position, for a new one. Director of Social Impact Initiatives at Blackstone Enterprises. You'd have your own team, your own budget, full autonomy to build the education programs you've been describing. The salary is 3 times what you're making now. Ethan didn't take the folder. Before you say anything, Dominic continued, I know what this looks like. Rich guy tries to buy forgiveness. I know, but I've been reading your employee file. Really reading it, not just skimming. And your performance reviews, and the notes from every project you've touched. You're the most qualified person in this building for a role like this. That was true before Saturday night. I was just too blind and too arrogant to see it. Ethan still didn't take the folder. Is this guilt or strategy? Both. And something else. What? It's the right thing to do. Dominic set the folder on the edge of the desk between them. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you to let me stop wasting your talent. Ethan looked at the folder, then at Dominic. I need to think about it. Take whatever time you need. And I have conditions. Name them. If I take this, I report to the board, not to you. Our working relationship stays professional and has oversight. I won't have anyone saying I got this job because you felt bad about what happened. Done. Second, the education programs I build are real, not PR stunts, not tax write-offs. Real programs with real outcomes that I measure and report publicly. That's exactly what I want. Third, and this one's not negotiable. I leave every day at 5:30. I pick up my daughter, I make her dinner, I read her a bedtime story. This company got 2 years of 12-hour days from me. That's over. Sophie comes first. Always. Dominic was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that surprised Ethan more than anything else that had happened in the past week. What's her favorite book? What? Sophie, what's her favorite book? You said I don't know anything about you. I'm trying to start. Ethan studied him, looking for the angle, the performance, the calculated move behind the question. He couldn't find one. Charlotte's Web, he said. She thinks the spider's the hero because she uses words to save her friend. She told me once that words are the strongest superpower because they can change how people see things. She sounds incredible. She is. Then go home at 5:30 every day and read to her, and build something at this company that would make her proud. Ethan picked up the folder. I'll give you an answer by Wednesday. He called Marco on his lunch break. I've been watching the video all morning. My abuela in Puerto Rico sent it to me. My abuela. The woman doesn't know how to use email, but she found your viral video. I need advice. About what? You're famous. Just ride the wave. Dominic offered me a promotion. Director of Social Impact. My own team, my own budget, 3 times my current salary. Marco was quiet. And you're hesitating because... Because 4 days ago he was betting on my humiliation, and now he's offering me a dream job. That's a big swing, Marco. Or it's a big correction. Sometimes people screw up so badly that the only way forward is a big move. The question isn't whether he's sincere. The question is whether the opportunity is real. It's real. The work is exactly what I've been wanting to do. Then take the job, E. Not for Dominic, for you, for Sophie, for every kid in Queens who doesn't have a coding class because nobody with the power to fix it has ever lived in their neighborhood. Marco paused. You've been hiding your whole life. Not anymore. Take the job and build something that matters. Ethan called Mathan Zhao next. Dominic's business partner picked up on the first ring. Mr. Calloway, I've been hoping you'd call. You know who I am? I've known who you are for a while. I'm the one who told Dominic to cancel the whole thing before it started. He didn't listen. He rarely does. Nathan's voice was measured, careful. I assume he made you an offer. Director of Social Impact. Take it. And I'm not saying that because Dominic asked me to. He didn't. I'm saying it because I've watched you work for 2 years, and you're operating at about 20% of your capacity. The other 80% has been sitting in a chair managing someone else's calendar. That's a criminal waste of talent, and I told Dominic so months ago. He never mentioned that. No, he wouldn't have. Acknowledging that his assistant was smarter than half his executive team would have required self-awareness he didn't have. Until Saturday. Wednesday morning, Ethan walked into Dominic's office and set the folder on his desk. I'll take the position, he said, with the conditions we discussed. And one more. What? First Friday of every month, you come to Queens, to the schools we're working with. Not for a photo op. You sit in the classroom and you watch what these kids are dealing with. You learn their names. You see what their lives look like. Because you can't fix what you don't understand. And right now, Dominic, you don't understand anything about the world most people live in. Dominic didn't hesitate. First Friday of every month, I'll be there. One more thing. You said one more. That's 2. Call it interest on 2 years of being invisible. Ethan allowed himself the smallest smile. The group chat. Single dad watch. I want it deleted. And I want Preston, Victoria, and Miles to know that if anything like that ever happens again, to me or to anyone, I'll make Saturday night look like a warm-up. It's already deleted. I handled it Sunday. Good. They shook hands. It was the first time they'd ever shaken hands in 2 years of working together. Ethan noticed that. He was pretty sure Dominic noticed it too. The months that followed moved fast. Ethan built his team from scratch. 4 people, then 7, then 12. He hired teachers, technologists, community organizers. He recruited from the neighborhoods he was trying to serve because he knew that the people who understood the problem best were the ones who'd lived it. The first pilot program launched in a Title I school in the South Bronx 8 weeks after he started. 32 kids. 12 tablets donated through the Harrington Foundation. A curriculum Ethan had been designing in his head for 5 years, finally brought to life. He taught the first class himself, stood in front of a room full of 8-year-olds who had never touched a computer that belonged to their school, and showed them how to write their first line of code. A girl in the front row, braids, glasses, a Spider-Man backpack, raised her hand. "Mr. Calloway, did you really tell off a bunch of billionaires at a fancy party?" "Where did you hear that?" "My mom showed me the video. She said you were brave." "I was scared, actually." "My mom says being scared and doing it anyway is the definition of brave." "Your mom is a smart woman." "I know. She's a nurse, like your mom was." Ethan had to turn to the whiteboard for a moment after that. Dominic kept his word about the first Fridays. Every month, he showed up in Queens or the Bronx or Brooklyn, wearing clothes that were slightly too nice for the neighborhood and looking slightly uncomfortable, which Ethan considered progress. He sat in classrooms. He talked to parents. He learned names. After the third visit, Dominic called Ethan from his car. "There's a kid in the Brownsville program, Deshaun. He's 9. He built a calculator app in 2 weeks. His teacher says he's the fastest learner she's ever seen." "I know Deshaun. He's extraordinary." "His family is about to be evicted. His mom lost her job last month." "I know that too. We're working on it." "What do you need?" "Housing assistance through the Foundation's Family Support Fund, and a job referral for his mother. She's got medical billing experience." "Done. I'll handle it today." There was a pause. Then Dominic said, quietly, "This is what you meant, isn't it? When you said, do something about it." "This is what I meant. It's harder than I thought. Knowing their names, seeing their faces. It's harder when they're real." "Welcome to the world, Dominic. It's been here the whole time." 6 months after the gala, the video had been viewed 18 million times. Ethan had been profiled in the Times, invited to speak at 3 education conferences, and featured in a documentary about inequality in American schools. Senator Chen's advisory committee had adopted his framework for evaluating education technology programs. David Harrington had committed $5 million to expanding the coding initiative to 20 schools across 3 boroughs. But the number Ethan cared about most was 32. That was how many kids were in the first class. And by the 6-month mark, every single one of them could write a basic program. Every single one of them had a tablet they could take home. Every single one of them had someone who showed up every week and said, "You can do this. I believe in you." Not because Ethan was special, because someone had said the same thing to him once. His mother, his father, Marco. And he knew what those words could build when they landed on the right ears at the right time. On a Friday evening in October, Ethan was closing up the program office in Brooklyn. A real office now, not a classroom corner, with desks and computers and a sign on the door that read, "Bridge Code, Building Futures Through Technology," when Sophie appeared in the doorway. "Daddy, Grandpa says you're working too late again." Frank was behind her, hands in his jacket pockets, looking only slightly apologetic. "She insisted on coming to get you. I am merely the driver." "I'm almost done, Princess." Sophie walked into the office and looked around. On the wall behind Ethan's desk, framed and hung at her eye level, was the drawing. The one she'd made months ago. Ethan wearing a crown, standing next to a castle of hearts. "My daddy is the king of our house." Below it, Ethan had added something new. A printed photograph from the gala, the moment after Harrington's speech, when the room was applauding. In the photo, Ethan was standing alone in the middle of the ballroom, head up, eyes clear, looking like a man who had just walked through fire and refused to burn. Sophie stared at both of them for a long time. Then she pointed at the drawing. "That's you." She pointed at the photograph. "And that's also you." "Yeah, Princess, that's also me." You look the same in both. Ethan knelt down to her level. What do you mean? In my picture, you look brave. In the photo, you look brave. It's the same. She put her hands on his face, the way she always did when she had something important to say. You were always a king, Daddy. You just didn't know other people could see it too. Frank made a sound behind them that he would later blame on allergies. Ethan pulled Sophie into his arms and held her. His daughter. His compass. The person who had looked at him every single day of her life and seen not a struggling single father, not an invisible assistant, not a man in superglued shoes, but a king. She had been right all along. They walked out of the office together, Ethan, Sophie, and Frank. 3 Callaways on a Brooklyn sidewalk, heading home. Sophie was between them, holding both their hands, swinging slightly with each step. Daddy? Yeah? Can we get ice cream? It's October. Ice cream doesn't have a season, Daddy. That's just propaganda. Where did you learn the word propaganda? School. Also, you say it when commercials come on TV. Frank laughed. Ethan laughed. Sophie looked deeply satisfied with herself. They got ice cream. They sat on a bench outside the shop, 3 generations of Callaways eating mint chocolate chip as the sun went down over Brooklyn. The skyline of Manhattan glittered across the river. All those towers, all those offices, all those people in their glass worlds, measuring life in numbers that didn't add up to this. A man, his father, his daughter, a bench, ice cream in October. It had started with a cruel joke in a conference room on the 50th floor. A bet placed by people who had everything except the one thing that mattered. A billionaire who thought humiliation was entertainment because he'd never learned what entertainment actually costs when you're the one paying. And it had ended here, on a bench, with ice cream. With a 7-year-old who believed that bravery was just being scared and doing it anyway, and the 68-year-old carpenter who believed that grit was something you forged, not something you bought, and a 34-year-old father who had finally stopped being invisible, not because the world had changed, but because he'd decided to stop hiding. Ethan looked at the skyline one more time. Somewhere over there, in a penthouse that cost more than most people would earn in 10 lifetimes, Dominic Blackstone was probably staring at the same view from the other side. Alone. Trying to learn how to be a person. Maybe succeeding. Maybe not. That was his journey, not Ethan's. Ethan's journey was right here. This bench. This ice cream. This girl with chocolate on her chin, who thought her father was braver than any superhero, stronger than any billionaire, and more important than anyone in any ballroom in the world. She was right. Sophie leaned against his arm.
Daddy?
Yeah, Princess. I love you to the moon and the sun and all the stars, and also Pluto, even though it's not a planet anymore. I love you more than that. Not possible, she said. And she was right about that, too. The story began with a man who was invisible. It ended with a man who was seen, not by the cameras, not by the crowd, not by the billionaires who finally noticed him when he put on a borrowed suit and walked into their world. He was seen by the people who had been looking at him all along. His father, his best friend, his daughter. The people who never needed him to prove anything, because they already knew. Ethan Callaway was never invisible. He was just surrounded by people who refused to open their eyes. Until one night, he made them.